Welcome to the Biz Bash podcast, where we make biz strategy a piece of cake. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Kami, but you might know us better as Eliza Ann Calligraphy and Kami Monet. We want to help you, our fellow stationers, artists, and calligraphers, confidently build a profitable and personality-driven creative biz.
We're here to share our honest-to-goodness advice and actionable strategies for ambitious artists.
So put on your party hat, quit being a procrastinator gator, and let's get this party started.
Hey everyone, it's Elizabeth, just hopping in real quick today before we start our episode to let you guys know that next week, September 20th to 24th, Kami and I are hosting Mockup Madness, which is a week of free trainings in Illustrator and Photoshop to help you elevate your digital mockup game. We would absolutely love to see you there. Like I said, it is completely free for you to sign up. And every single day we are dropping 2 different training videos for you to watch. So I am in charge of the Illustrator trainings. Kami is in charge of the Photoshop trainings. And hopefully we will be able to give you guys a really good foundation and understanding of how to create mock-ups for your products and your invitations, specifically for your paper products. So if you want to attend, grab your free ticket at bizbirthdaybash.com/mockup-madness. Once again, that's bizbirthdaybash.com/mockup-madness. It's free to sign up, so why not go ahead and do it? And if you do want to keep all of the videos for later on and you want to have lifetime access and you want to have a live Q&A with me and Kami about the material that you're learning during the free week, then you can upgrade to lifetime access if you want to. That is definitely an option that you have. And right now it is only $57 to snag that lifetime access pass before the Mockup Madness week begins. Once the actual week of Mockup Madness begins, that lifetime access pass will go up in cost. I think it's going up to $87. So hop on over there and grab that if you're interested in that. Otherwise, just enjoy the trainings for free. We are so excited to be hosting this and really hope that you join. All right, enjoy today's episode. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Biz Birthday Bash podcast. We have another amazing guest episode today featuring Braden Drake, and he's going to talk to us all about taxes and legalities and all the fun things, but he's going to explain it like we're 5. He's going to keep it basic and amazing. So real quick about Braden, he is a California licensed attorney and tax professional. His tagline is your gay best friend, here to help you get your legal and tax shit legit. Braden works primarily with service-based creative small business owners through his courses, where he educates on contracts, business entities, cash flow systems, and taxes. So Braden, welcome. We are so excited you're here with us today.
Hi, thanks for having me. Always down to chit chat on a podcast, so I'm very pumped.
Our audience is pumped too because they have been asking us for a while to get you on the show, and we're very happy it worked out like it did. We went to batch record some new guest episodes, and when I reached out to Braden, he was actually like, this must be meant to be because I was just about to pitch people today. So we found each other at the perfect time. Just exciting.
Yeah, when I heard that there were people in your audience recommending me, it made me feel very, very special. I was like, I must have some fans out there, which is awesome. Probably some of my good friends, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, and I'm actually in you have a Facebook group, right?
Yes.
I'm in that. I love it. It's amazing. Super helpful. I think I actually panic emailed you at one point in my life. That part is like blocked out because it's like this horrible thing with redoing my website, Elizabeth, as you remember. But yeah, so I've always been a fan. So excited to have you on. And honestly, this is the type of stuff we get questions about all the time. We're like, we don't know. We need a professional. So it'll be great to have you just explain more in detail for our audience.
Beautiful. Let's do it. I'm excited.
All right. So question number 1, Braden, we would love to know about the journey that led you to where you are today. How did you end up serving creatives and small biz entrepreneurs and assisting them with legal and tax knowledge?
Yeah. So we could, do a whole podcast episode on my journey. It's a whole fun story, but I'll kind of spare you all the details of how I ended up in law school. We all go through undergrad. None of us know what we're doing. I kind of just ended up deciding to do that. And then I kind of just wound my way through some internships And I decided that working like a normal law firm job was not going to be the path for me. I was like kind of miserable interning there. I said, I don't even want to imagine what it's going to be like trying to work here 80 hours. So I knew that I wanted to be self-employed. And while I was waiting for my bar results, I got a part-time job at West Elm because I always love HGTV, interior design, like kind of creative stuff. And I often make a joke with all of my students, all my creative students, that in college I bought a DSLR at one point, but I never learned how to do anything other than auto. And I tried a whole bunch of different creative endeavors, and none of them were really my passion, but they're things I like to dabble in. So pretty early on, it seemed like a really good fit that I would use my law degree and my tax background to work in this niche, because we could kind of share some passions, but I'm leveraging my strengths to help you all leverage your strengths.
Perfect. Absolutely love it. I mean, it is kind of amazing how people do end up self-employed one way or another. We all have different paths to get us there. So I'll let Cami ask our first official question that really leads into the meat of this episode.
Oh, so official. Yeah. So let's just talk about the number one thing people tend to overlook when starting their own business. What do you think that thing would be?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we can tackle this really with almost every question. We can tackle it from both a legal perspective and a tax perspective, since I do teach on both of these topics. But from a tax perspective, I would say not paying taxes, not paying quarterly taxes more specifically. So we can always dive into that a little bit more. On the legal side of things, I teach this concept. I call it the layers of legal protection for your business. I always tell people to think about layers of clothing, right? So right now it's in the middle of summer. It's very, very hot most places. You probably don't have a whole lot of layers on. If you're going to go somewhere really cold in the wintertime, you're going to need some more layers, but that's also dependent on how acclimated you are to the cold. So someone from Minnesota is probably going to need fewer layers than myself, who's down here in Southern California. When I go back home to Indiana for wintertime, I get cold very easily. So the whole purpose of this analogy is the layers of protection are not only based on how long you've been in business, what kind of contracts you enter, but also your personal comfort level, because we all are, a little bit different when it comes to risk aversion. So the primary layers of protection are insurance, LLCs or business entities, and contracts. And the biggest mistake I see is people really just leaning on one of those things, thinking that it's going to fully protect them in business. And ideally, you want all three.
That's an excellent answer. And I know people can get just completely overwhelmed with all the things that they have to do at the beginning to get their business legit. So what do you think in terms of going and doing this via LegalZoom, hiring someone directly, or doing a DIY? I mean, I know from personal experience that people at the local county office in your area tend to be super helpful. And I've heard great stories about that, but it's a little more legwork to do it. So do you, as a professional, have an opinion on that?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of DIYing, but with some help, right? I'm also a little bit biased because I offer paid solutions to all of these things, but I can pretty much back up why I've created most of these paid solutions. Most of us are not creating products if we don't think there's a need in the market, right? My beef with LegalZoom, and I call it a beef because I complain about them on my podcast all the time. People can go listen to some episodes if they want to hear some horror stories. But really the stuff that they charge you for, I'll give you one specific example. You can pay LegalZoom to do your EIN for you, your employment identification number. And you both probably know that this is free to do through the IRS website. If you go to the IRS website, they're going to ask you, what's your business name? What's your industry? What's your address? And guess what? If you go to LegalZoom, you're going to have to enter in the exact same information. And then LegalZoom, I'm assuming, is using some sort of computer algorithm to just transpose that information onto the IRS website. It's why are you going to pay them to do that when it's for free? And that's how a lot of their offerings are. And I find for most people, the how is actually not all that difficult. It's more of the what and what steps do you need to take. Also, are you getting everything that you need? So if you're going to form an LLC, you need to have an operating agreement. It's very, very important. It's basically a contract between you and your business. And a lot of these steps are left out when you use online services. They also don't advise you on how to keep your business structure in compliance. So I have a lot of student stories about students who forgot to pay annual fees or annual taxes specifically for the LLC, and they ended up having to pay a whole bunch in back taxes, and it turned into a mess. So getting a little bit of professional help to figure out all those steps is, in my opinion, very important.
Yeah, because the hardest thing is when you just don't understand why you're doing something, and then you start missing all those things that are like, oh, obviously I need to do these estimated taxes or pay this fee or whatever. And you miss all those because you didn't take the time to actually learn about it. I think that's where like the easy route of LegalZoom can get you in trouble. And we did LegalZoom for our business, Elizabeth. And I got Braden, okay, because they send you all these like other things in the mail because I guess they sell your information, I'm sure, to people. And so I got this like very official letter that had like the state of Florida seal about like how I needed to pay this tax thing. And I was late and I was like panicked because I was like, I just ruined our entire business because I didn't pay this thing. And so I sent in a check for like $80 or something. And it was totally a scam, but they got me.
Those kind of spam letters are actually very common. And I won't blame that on LegalZoom because people get that regardless of how you file. Yeah, because these companies, what they do is they track the new LLC filings in the state, and then they get you in their registry. And these are very common. We see a whole bunch of them. But like in my programs, I teach something that I call the business blueprint, which is every single like license or legality that you need to do in the correct order you need to do it in. And every state is a little bit different. But I tell my students, if you get a letter about anything that's not on the blueprint, like bring the letter to me. Like I usually have them actually send me a photo and I look at it and I'm like, no, this is spam. You don't need to do this.
Yep. And it's funny because I think you're right, Braden, that they're combing through those registries to see what's going on. Because my husband and I were warned of the same thing when we bought our house. They do the same thing to you then. They like know when the information comes through, with the state of, oh, this person owns a house now. And you get a lot of those other silly things. So I was extra vigilant because I knew what had happened to Cammie with our biz stuff. She was like, oh, I just paid for this certificate thing that we really didn't need. And I was like, it's okay.
Yeah, those
worst things.
Those certificates are really, it's just like a pretty piece of paper that they would like send you to put in like, I don't know, like a frame to hang on your wall. Like you could do that, but I mean, no one needs that, right? Another really common one, and it's funny you mentioned the house stuff because we just bought a new house a couple months ago, so got a lot of those letters too. But people get a lot of letters about employment posters. That's a really common one. Like if any of you ever worked like in a work location where you're an employee, you go in the break room and they have all those labor law posters, right? That tell you what your rights are. Well, there are a lot of private companies that will try to sell those to you after you register your LLC. And you probably don't need them because most of us work from a home office and don't have employees. But if you get to the point where you do need them, you just buy them through the state for like a fraction of the cost. It's wild.
Yes. I definitely get those for my LLC all the time when it's like, you need to put up this poster to notify your employees of such and such terms and conditions. And I always trash it. I'm on to them, Braden. I know.
The name is always like Florida Department of Employment posters or like some nonsense that does sound very official, and that's how they trick people.
And they print it on nice paper. I think that's what got Cammie.
Yeah, this one had the seal on it. That's what got me. It was the state seal. I was like, oh, this is definitely official.
Yeah, you're like, they use some legit printing company for this. So
yes.
Yep. I mean, I will confess, I did use LegalZoom for Eliza and calligraphy, and we used LegalZoom for Biz Birthday Bash. But when you break it down, so if you guys want to learn from Braden and he breaks it down in his blueprint, all those things can be done on your own. It just takes a little extra time and sleuthing to figure it out.
Yeah, if anyone's contemplating LegalZoom, just reach out to me. Like I have a course. My course is called Sole Prop to LLC. It's like very obvious, kind of boring name, but it teaches you like how to go through each step. And I have strategically priced it to be like a very similar price point to what LegalZoom charges you, except that I actually like teach you what to do. So come talk to me.
Perfect.
Okay, well, now that we've been talking about how to go from sole prop to LLC, can you explain the difference between those two and just explain it to us like we're 5-year-olds? Because this is always a big question that comes up in the entrepreneur's life. So let's just talk about it right now and break it down.
Yes. So I have a couple different analogies for this. Like one of them is a science analogy, which don't worry if you're terrible at science. I also am terrible at science. But back in high school, I almost said professor. We don't have professors in high school. I had a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Wilson, and she's from Alabama. So she had a very thick accent. And I remember when she was teaching us mitosis and meiosis, and I never really remember which one is which. It doesn't matter. But she would always say, and now when we're going through mitosis, these cells are going to be dividing. And that just really stuck with me, right? Of course it is. But the whole point is like, our cells have this ability to literally split in half. And then, a bunch of other stuff probably happens that I don't remember. But when we form an LLC, it's the same thing. Like when we have a sole proprietorship, we are our business. Our business is us. There's no separation. This is why we can, even though it's not a good idea, you can get away with using your personal bank account for your business. Don't recommend it, but it's not illegal. And you basically, there's no separation, right? So when we form an LLC, our business literally splits off from ourselves like a dividing cell. That's kind of complicated, but hopefully that makes sense. So now you're two separate entities. So there's you over here, there's your business over here. And this is why we have to have things like a business operating agreement, because now we are running our business, but there needs to be a contract with the rules between us. We need to sign contracts in the name of our business with our LLC name. Our business needs to own our bank account. If we get trademarks, the LLC should own the trademarks. Everything should be under the LLC. So that's how the separation works. So that's our first analogy. So the second analogy I always like to give people is, and I wrote about both of these in my book. So these are like two of my fun stories I like to give. The second one is I always tell people to imagine like the bubble that Glinda floats inside of the Wizard of Oz. Are you with me? Do you both know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So I loved the Wizard of Oz as like a young gay boy. Should have been assigned to my mother. But anyway, so Glinda comes down in her magic bubble, but imagine like something representative of your business in this bubble. So for me, I don't work with a lot of physical product. I would just think about like my computer or my podcasting equipment inside the bubble. So the bubble here represents your LLC, right? And if someone ever sued you, imagine whatever you've pictured inside of the bubble like exploding, but the bubble is magical and it protects everything you have on the outside of that bubble from the shrapnel. And so it protects all your personal assets. That's the point of the LLC. So LLCs make us separate from our business and they give us liability protection, which is not the case when we're sole proprietors.
Got it. Okay. Those are good analogies. We love crazy analogies on this show for sure.
Yeah, I get like really, really wacky ones when I'm running and stuff, and I have to like voice memo them to myself.
Totally understand that. Not the running part, but yeah, getting him at weird times.
Braden, do you have any advice for our listeners on when it is the right time to become an LLC and move away from a sole prop?
Yeah, so really it's never too early to form an LLC. I hear this is like, I recorded a podcast episode. I think I titled it the top 10 worst pieces of legal and tax advice I've seen in Facebook groups. You both could probably help me collect some more pieces of bad advice we could address. But one of them is, I always hear people say something like, my CPA told me not to form an LLC. Literally one person said, my CPA told me not to form an LLC until I'm making $13,000, which was like the most arbitrary number. But I've seen all different sorts of numbers thrown out there. And none of that really makes sense. I actually kind of do give a revenue mark, but it is a little bit arbitrary. But the example I like to give for this, not an analogy, but a story, is I say, imagine that Bill Gates gets like really, really bored doing his Microsoft thing. So he decides to start a base jumping company. But for whatever reason, like although he built this massive corporation, this one's not very successful. He never really makes any money. Do you think any wise attorney is going to tell Bill Gates, well, you're not really making any money, so you don't need an LLC for your base jumping company?
Definitely not.
No, right? Because the point is, like, Bill Gates has a lot of assets, he has a lot to lose, and he's running a very high risk business. So for most of us, we obviously don't have the same assets as him. We might not be running as risky of a business, but it's never a bad idea to form an LLC, even if we don't have assets now, because we'll hope to accumulate them in the future, and lawsuits can stick with us. So for most people, the question really is only like, can I afford an LLC? And if you're lucky to be in a state not California, that's very inexpensive to do so, then I typically just advise that people do it very early on.
What is a typical, like how much is a typical LLC run? Like just an estimate.
So in California, it's $800 a year, which is wild. And a lot of other states, like my home state of Indiana, I believe one of my students told me it's $35 every other year. So if you're talking
my gosh,
I would say even less than like $200 a year, it's at that point, I just can think about it as like very, very cheap extra insurance. So
yes, my annual registration in Georgia is $50 a year.
Yeah. But like at that point, you might as well do it really early on, especially if you're committed to your business. That's the main thing, right? If you're just kind of like testing out the idea, then, maybe we wait a few months, see if our business has legs. But as soon as you're like, yes, I'm doing this, we're making it happen, let's go ahead and do the LLC. But I do tell people that I consider insurance and contracts to be your essential layers of protection. So start with those, and then we'll add on the LLC like as soon as we can.
Yes, because even if you're a sole proprietor for a while, having a good contract is still going to cover your butt when it comes down to it, LLC or not. So, all right, let's talk a little bit too, without getting too complicated or crazy, because you did such a great job with those analogies, just for the different tax implications for different kind of LLCs. So people will get tripped up on this too, right? Because a single member LLC, really similar to a sole prop, but with the legal protection. But then you can elect to have your LLC taxed different ways. So if you could help us understand that a little bit too, specifically our listeners, that would be wonderful.
Sure. So the first, and you teed this up really, really well. You're nailing it, by the way. Killing it. So the first thing that a lot of people don't understand, and you kind of hinted at this, is that an LLC is taxed the same as a sole proprietorship. So there's no tax difference. And a lot of people are confused by this. This is why they think they need to wait until some arbitrary figure to form an LLC. We form LLCs early for the liability protection, but they do not change our taxes, right? Even in California, where we have an $800 annual franchise tax, they call it a tax. It's really just an LLC fee. So I don't even really count that. It's just a fee to have your LLC. So for the rest of us, LLCs are the taxed the same as sole props. If you already have a general partnership, so if you are in a business partnership with someone, but you've not formed what I call a formal legal entity, you have a general partnership. When your general partnership forms an LLC, it's still taxed the same way, right? So that's the first thing we have to understand. Beyond that, you can technically elect to have your LLC taxed as a C corporation. We never really do that. I won't even get into the weeds of like why. The only thing that's really relevant is to know that typically that's not an option until your business is making like multi-millions of dollars and you have a high personal net worth. So at that point, just go hire an accountant and an attorney. Meanwhile, for the rest of us, the question is really just LLC or S corporation. So we determine when we want to form an S corporation.
And do you have any insight on that you are willing to share with people? Cami and I have talked about it a little bit because Fizz Birthday Bash is an S Corp. But for our audience's sake, are there parameters like those fun arbitrary numbers, for example, of like you're making this much per year or things to look out for when that might be something to look into?
Yes. So typically we're not going to look into doing an S Corp until we're profiting at least $80,000 in our business, typically, if we're a sole business. So that's our threshold. We can get into, do you want to get into the weeds of like how S Corps actually save people money?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Okay. We love being in the weeds.
It's kind of complicated, but I just looked at our clock and we've only been recording for 21 minutes. At this point, I answered these same questions so often that I'm kind of able to like knock through.
Oh, I love it. So
you're efficient and we love that. But yes, let's take a ride and see what you have to share.
Okay, perfect. So S Corps, I wrote a blog post called S Corps, like the mythical unicorn of business entities, because like we all know they're awesome, but like we've never really seen behind the veil and people don't understand them. So I call them the unicorn, right? They're really, really cool. The way an S Corp works is once you form an S Corp, you actually put yourself on salary. It's kind of a little bit of a foreign concept, but if any of us have ever had like a salary job or even an hourly job, we know that we get a paycheck from our employer, right? The employer withholds all of our taxes for us. So they withhold them, they send them to the IRS, to the state, they take care of all of that. When we form an S Corp, we do the same thing for ourselves. We put ourselves on payroll, which is kind of a brain twister, but it works. And then above and beyond our salary, any other profit we make in the business, we pay out in the form of shareholder distributions. So those are paid to us. And of course, people might be thinking, well, what's the point of all of this? And the point is that we pay more in taxes on our salary. We pay less in taxes on our distributions. So everyone that runs a small business, if you have what we call self-employment income, which all business income is self-employment income for the most part, we pay two different forms of taxes. We pay income tax, which is the tax we're mostly familiar with all the tax brackets and the different taxes based on our income level. And we also pay self-employment tax. And self-employment tax is our personal share of Medicare and Social Security. So we have to pay self-employment tax in order to collect that when we retire. It's also just legally required, right? And that totals a 15.3% tax. What confuses people, or what no one really understands, is that only typically salaries are subject to self-employment taxes, because self-employment taxes are only paid on what the IRS calls earned income. If you receive distributions, like profit distributions from a company, like let's say we all invest in Apple, and Apple sends us a dividend check. Like most of us kind of know how that works. That's investment or income earned from investments, and we wouldn't pay self-employment tax on that. So same thing when we run our own business, we can pay ourselves a salary, and then we can also reap a reward for being the owner of our business, and that is like a dividend distribution that we don't pay self-employment tax on. So that is the kind of the basics of how an S Corp actually functions.
Yes. And I remember when my accountant explained this to me for the first time, and I had to ask so many follow-up questions because my mind was kind of blown. And that's how we kind of, Cami and I collectively decided, okay, Biz Birthday Bash is going to be an S Corp. So we run payroll for ourselves once a month, and we use Paychex, which is a pretty well-known payroll brand. But I've heard of people using Gusto and other things as well. So Braden, are you personally an S Corp?
I am an S Corp. So I actually formed my S Corp in January. So I've only been an S Corp this year. I use Gusto for my payroll. I highly recommend them. Paychex is actually a larger company. They do a lot of larger company payrolls. Gusto tends to market like much more towards, I call us micro businesses, because the government considers small businesses up to $25 million. So I made up the term micro businesses for businesses making under $1 million.
Perfect.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah, we've heard lots of great things about Gusto. My accountant recommended that as well. So sounds like a good pick.
Yes.
I know. We might have to think on it.
I love Gusto. I think I've never really used Paychex, but I think the biggest difference is that probably just the interface is a lot cleaner to use. I mean, it's a little bit more modern, basically.
Yeah, Paychex has that little bit of like old school vibe behind the scenes.
Yes.
But it's not bad. I think they have made some updates in the recent years. Like back when I worked for another person, when I had a different boss, before I worked for myself, she ran things via Paychex. And then I think our accountant referred us, so we got some kind of deal or something like that. And so if it's not broke, don't fix it. But also we've talked about Gusto many times, so we might have to reevaluate.
Yes. And while we're in the weeds here, can you also talk about how you choose how much your salary is versus those distributions, and just kind of shed some light on how that would look if you were doing that?
Absolutely. So I do want to mention one thing as well before anyone who's listening gets like too excited. There have been recent tax law changes, specifically this rule called the qualified business income deduction, that's kind of eaten away at some of the S Corp benefits. So now I tend not to recommend S Corps unless someone actually has an individual tax professional or is in one of my programs, because there's some more complicated tax considerations that are like difficult to discuss via podcast. So cautionary tale.
Okay.
The thing about the salary is that the IRS requires us to pay ourselves what they call a reasonable minimum salary, or pay ourselves reasonable compensation.
Which what does that even mean? I'm so sorry. I just have to hop in because what does it even mean? Anyways.
Yeah, it's very, very subjective and also dumb. But Right. The reason they do this is because the lower our salary is, the more we save in taxes, or the less we pay in taxes, because we save that self-employment tax on everything that's not salary. So is the IRS going to let us pay ourselves a $10,000 salary? No. So we have to pay ourselves a reasonable salary. And they want you to do research on what would someone with your amount of experience in your geographic area make for providing your same services within another company, which is difficult to do, especially if you're in more of a unique industry. For me, it's a little bit easier, right? Like in my law firm, I'm going to look at, well, what would an attorney with 4 to 5 years of experience make doing tax law in Southern California? And I can look at places like Glassdoor and all of this. The nice thing is, this is something I've been digging into recently, is that you can actually look at the percentage of work that you do in your job. So as small business owners, we all probably are on the same page in that maybe we only spend like 30% of our time doing actual client work. And then 30% of our time is, I'd say 40% of our time is run on marketing, and 30% of our time is run on, like basic bookkeeping and doing this and doing that. And so we can actually kind of figure out our salary percentage based on wearing all those different hats. And it's definitely not something easy to do, but I always recommend my students to pick a range. So maybe on your lower range, it's $50,000, and on your higher range, it's $70,000. And the more risk averse you are, the higher you're going to want your salary to be in that range.
Yeah, we do things kind of like interestingly. I mean, everyone else has a different take on it too, because Cami and I's income, it fluctuates so much depending on whether or not we do a summit during the year or what new products we're dropping and things like that, that we just try to do like, we have a set goal in mind, but we try not to pay ourselves like more distributions than we're running payroll, if that makes sense. So we keep that kind of like a 50-50 split, because then our accountant was like, that's not going to raise eyebrows, right? Whereas like you're paying, everything you're making is like going 10% to paying via salary and 90% distribution. That's going to get a red flag every time.
Yeah. And the way that it works is usually if what you're doing is like pretty reasonable, again, that buzzword, right? Then you're not gonna like trigger the IRS computerized system to get pulled for audit. Of course, there are like very randomized methods of being pulled for audit. That's a very low percentage that happens. But the way this works is if you ever do get audited and they said, we don't think you paid yourself enough, then you would say, well, this is how we calculated it, and this is the determination that we made. And then you kind of just like argue with them about it. It's kind of how.
Yeah.
All right. So as long as you can back it up, you can.
Yes.
Let's hope we don't get audited.
That's why that's why I always tell people, when you're going through this analysis, you want to like document, like I take screenshots. So I'll, like look at certain sources to determine average salaries. I'll like screenshot it. And I basically create almost like a standard operating procedure or like a documentation in a Google Doc of how I determine the salary. And then we just save that like with all of our other business records. And then if you ever do get audited, you can say, this is how I determined my reasonable salary. And they can kind of push back and say, well, you should have looked at this thing or look at this thing. But oftentimes, if you're paying yourself a reasonable salary of $50,000 and they say it should have been $60,000, and that's the result that they come to, you're going to owe them basically self-employment tax on $10,000. So it's not like awesome, but it's not going to be like really, really wild.
Yeah, you have to do really crazy crap to get in huge trouble with the IRS. Like, and I'm not encouraging that, but you got to like really mess stuff up, because normally there's a pretty good way of like adjusting things, or you owe some money here or there, or you get a letter requesting this or that. But the IRS isn't as much of a boogeyman as people make it out to be, like you're not going to get dragged away in the middle of the night by somebody hunting you down.
That's what I think is going to happen. I'm like, they're coming for me. It's just like that scene in Ghost, where the demons come and like, oh my God. It's like how I picture it.
Yeah, I do. This can freak people out, but I actually think it's kind of reassuring in a weird way, is that about 80 to 90% of people will at some point in their life get a letter from the IRS claiming that they like owe more money. So that's most of it. Like that's the vast majority of us, right? And the reason I share that is because a lot of people like have these letters at home and they're not telling any of their business friends about them because they're like ashamed of it. But the reality is A, like the IRS is imperfect and they make mistakes all the time. So like that letter may not be correct. But B, it could be as simple as like you forgot to report one 1099 on your tax return, or you filed your tax returns before you got all of your 1099s and then you didn't amend your tax return. So in that case, you might just say, oh yeah, Cami did pay me $1,000 for that and I should have reported it. Like I owe another $180 in tax. So you like pay the tax, you move on. This happens to all of us, including myself.
Yes, it's going to be okay. I feel like you're very reassuring, being like, it's not a big deal. Everyone just chill out. Because I think we all kind of need to hear that.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah. Is you just got to know, like, you got to look at the letters, right? The main thing is like never ignore letters from the IRS. Like, you want to be very, very prompt in your action, especially if, you know, they're claiming that you owe something that you don't owe. You want to respond to it right away and get it taken care of. But a lot of their notices are computerized, and a real person isn't even looking at your stuff until you like ignore their computerized letters for like 6 to 12 months.
Yes, got it. Okay, so we've talked about some other systems you like Gusto, but can you talk about maybe some bookkeeping systems you love or recommend, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, so I have a love-hate relationship with most standard bookkeeping systems. So QuickBooks is the most common solution out there. It's a fabulous tool, but it's a complicated tool. So I have this like personal theory that I like to talk about on social media a lot. And I always say that complexity in systems is only as useful as our own ability to keep up with those systems. I think a lot of systems people, like I'm a Virgo myself, so I love organizing and creating systems, but like my ADHD mind does not allow me to really maintain them. So as much as I love to create like 28-step workflows in Dubsado, or like spend literally an entire weekend setting up Asana projects, which I've done, I'm not going to be able to maintain them. It's too complicated. And people tend to do that with their bookkeeping as well. So I see a lot of new business owners get really excited. Maybe actually, no, they probably don't get excited at all, but they download QuickBooks and they set it up. But then everything gets miscategorized and it's confusing, and then they don't want to open it and it's all wrong. And then they have to hire someone to fix it. So I'm not saying that QuickBooks is not a good solution, but if you're going to decide to use it, you need to take the time to learn how to use it. That's very important. So what I do is I recommend a lot of new business owners just to use a simple spreadsheet, because at the end of the day, all the IRS cares about is how much income did you earn and what are your deductible business expenses. So you just track them on a spreadsheet, call it a day. Once that gets too tedious because you're making too much money, which is a quality problem to have, or you have too many deductions, also a quality problem. Well, maybe not, because you spend money.
Depending.
Then we look into either leveling up to a software or just hiring a bookkeeper.
Yeah, that's perfect. For years, actually, Cami used GoDaddy bookkeeping, and then she got me hooked on it. So now I use GoDaddy bookkeeping, and that's what we use for BBB, because Braden, it is stupid simple. I am not kidding. It is like the simplest thing and like dummy proof. At least I feel like it is. It takes a second to adjust.
It's idiot proof, for sure.
But it syncs with all like the main things a lot of like creative people need, including Etsy. And the way to sync Etsy and Stripe via QuickBooks is insanely complicated and not ideal. But Cami recently finally hired someone and outsourced bookkeeping for her, which was exciting.
Did they make you, Cami, did they make you switch softwares?
Yeah, I'm on QuickBooks with them, but I never sign into it. They do everything, and I get my monthly reports and meetings with them. So I switched over in January. I just had too many transactions going back and forth, and it just became a little overwhelming, decided to GoDaddy. But starting out, I felt like that was a really, really great option. I will always recommend it. I still have mine too, because I like to look at it occasionally. It's easier to look at than QuickBooks. And I'm like, cool, it's still on point with what my bookkeeper is sending me. So it still works, but it's just like having that extra insight is so valuable. So definitely glad I switched.
I'll have to look into that one, because I haven't had anyone recommend that before. So I'll have to check.
I know. Well, it sounds like it's going to be like the cheesiest software ever. I mean, GoDaddy just sounds so silly, but I'm like, it's really robust and very helpful.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of my students really like Wave due to its simplicity.
Oh yes,
as well.
I used Wave at one point.
Popular one. But the reason, Cami, I ask if you're bookkeeper, how do you switch over, is that's what typically happens.
Yeah.
Because most bookkeepers are QuickBooks certified, and a lot of tax accountants. So if you hire a tax preparer, they do their tax return through Intuit's professional tax software. And they basically, they're like, they like to have the books in QuickBooks because everything auto imports. But that's nice. If you hire someone that's going to do all the work for you, you don't have to worry about it. But what happens is if you're going to do your own bookkeeping, but hire a tax accountant, they might want you to use QuickBooks. So if you already have someone, it's always good to ask. But you could always just fire them and hire someone else who can use
Luckily, I mean, yeah, my accountant takes a good old classic profit and loss report. So
that should be all they need. But some tax accountants, they basically are like, give me your P&L and I'm going to file your tax return, assuming that everything on your P&L is correct. But a lot of other people are like, well, I kind of have my bookkeeping, but it's a hot mess and I need you to fix it before you do the return. And then that'll kind of depend on where you've done your bookkeeping. But it kind of sounds like you go with this program like GoDaddy, you might not run into that problem of your books being a mess in the first place. So
yeah, it's been a pleasant surprise. It really took me like 10 minutes to set up, not even kidding. I just synced the accounts that I needed and everything showed up where it needed to show up. And I was super shocked. QuickBooks it's just intense. So it makes sense why people like professionals like it because it can reconcile things. I know that's a big deal.
Reconcile, yes, the reconcile. Oh gosh.
So anyhow, Braden, I would love for you to take some time to just explain to people why understanding your bookkeeping and numbers is so important for anyone running their own business. And just maybe you can dive into why do you think people are so intimidated by knowing the numbers in the first place?
Well, I'll start with your second question because this is really kind of like a mindset question, right? So why are people so intimidated by learning their numbers? Well, I think first of all, there are a lot of people who are like, I'm not a math person. I'm not good at numbers, which I'm going to call like BS on that the majority of the time, because we're not like, no one's asking you to do calculus, right? Like to figure out your taxes. You got to add up deductions. You got to have to subtract. You have to be able to do addition, subtraction, which we can all do on a calculator. And the most complicated thing we ever need to do is find percentages. Like I'm going to encourage you to figure out what your profit is, right? That's a percentage. So the math, not that complicated, right? The other thing is it's kind of like the head in the sand thing. Like people don't want to look at the numbers because they're struggling with personal finances, and looking at their business finances might bring them to reality of like how little money they're making, right? Like how much of a struggle it is right now. Or it might tip them off to like, oh my goodness, I'm spending way too much on my business. My profit isn't that high. And those are not comfortable feelings, especially if we have any like financial stressors at home. So that's something that we have to work on, right? I don't do a lot of that in my programs. I recommend some like really great money mindset books. That's kind of a starting point for a lot of people. But after we get over that, then we just have to learn the simple systems to look at our numbers. And we need to do this for two reasons, right? So like, why do we need to look at our numbers? Well, the first reason is just compliance. We have to file our tax returns. You know, it'd be really easy if we wanted to, we could just take our Stripe report and report all of our income and call it a day, but we'd pay way, way too much in taxes, right? So we have to track our business expenses if we want to take those deductions and save on taxes. So that's the first reason. The second reason is for strategy, right? So if you ever talk to people who are like certified financial officers, which isn't really a thing, that's just kind of like a designation that we give ourselves, then they're going to talk to you a lot more about finance strategy rather than compliance stuff, like looking at your profit margins, break-even points, how much you should be charging, and all these kind of strategic questions. So if you're not really digging into your numbers regularly, you might not realize that you're way undercharging for that one specific thing. Or maybe what I see oftentimes is people will figure out they're spending 70% of their time in their business on their least profitable service. So let's try to phase that one out and sell more of our really profitable thing instead.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that makes perfect sense, especially the whole idea of, you know, burying your head in the sand because you don't want to know type of situation. Definitely adds up a lot.
Yeah, we always say numbers don't lie, and sometimes you don't like what they're telling you, but you really cannot move forward in your business without knowing what everything is saying. And once you get past like, oh, I'm making a profit, I'm working on this, you can really start to strategize with those numbers and say like, oh, I'm spending this much on ads. Am I getting this return on this? Or just look at different ways. Like I literally just had a meeting with my bookkeeper last month and being like, okay, I'm spending this much on Etsy ads. What are ways that I could offset that more? Because I feel like that's the biggest expense right now. We were talking about like raising prices a couple dollars on on certain things just to cover that and make it even more profitable. And I'm like, these are the great things to know that I wouldn't necessarily have if I didn't have my numbers to look at and know exactly where things are going.
Right. Like you probably, I'm assuming, both track KPIs in the business, I would assume.
What does that stand for? That would help.
Key performance indicators. So like when we're looking at your Etsy ads, like what are your conversion rates? What's your rate?
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of stuff. So especially if you ever hire a business coach, they're going to be like, I know I was in like a paid, I always say high level mastermind. High level really just translates to expensive. If all of us are being honest, I was in a expensive mastermind. And whenever I would ask a question about like, should I do this? Should I do that? The woman who ran it would always say, well, like, what are your numbers telling you? What are your KPIs around that? What's converting better? And if we're going to look at this, those kind of things is very, very important, but we need to do the same things with our numbers, right? Like a lot of us, I know, at least when I started my business, I had a bullet journal and I would like journal down my number of Instagram followers every week and all that kind of stuff, which isn't totally unimportant, but those typically are not the most important factors we need to be tracking. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but basically you got to track everything in your business, including your finances. It's very important.
I like tangents, so I was embracing it.
Okay, good. Yes, we can talk about KPIs too. So I don't get like really in detail on things like KPIs and systems and in my universe, we'll say. But what I often tell my students is we end up getting on these topics because I kind of split the functions of business into 3 categories. So you have your service, like the actual thing that you do, right? So if you're a photographer, photography is your service. So maybe you're going to go take courses from another well-known photographer who's going to teach you how to become a better photographer. Or the other category is marketing. So there's all kinds of marketing courses you can take. And then the third category is like other. It's all the business stuff, which includes systems, hiring people, people management, legal, tax. And I kind of like just cover all of that, basically. It's the stuff no one else really wants to talk about.
But at the same time, it's so important.
Yes. Yeah. This is why I'm like currently working with a messaging coach on how I can like better, like, here's why you need to do this, people, right? I think because it's a lot of the times people know that they need to. It's just a tougher sell because it's not as fun.
Yeah. I mean, it is more like a deep dive, right? It's like the next level of everything, being like, okay, you've got this figured out. Now let's go one step further. And it's just like fine tuning is how I kind of vision it.
Yes, exactly.
Agreed. All right. Well, Braden, you clearly know what's up. And I love your analogies. You make things feel fun. You make them feel simple. You make them feel not scary. So please take a moment to tell us what services and courses and all the things that you're offering. I know you had mentioned one earlier, but we want the people to know why you are the right choice and what you have to teach them, basically.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for asking. The first place I would tell everyone to go is if you're listening to this, you clearly are a fan of podcasts. So you can go check out my podcast. The title does have a swear word in it. So just put that in the show notes, or you can message me on Instagram. I'll help you navigate to it. Not one that you probably want to listen to like with your children present, unless they already hear all those words. So podcast, great resource. I also have a Facebook group. As we mentioned earlier, it's called Braden's Besties. That was kind of like a placeholder name. I gave it when I opened it, and then I just never got around to changing it. So we're just running with it. So you can come be my bestie in the Facebook group. My website is at bradendrake.com, and you'll find all my courses there. So we're actually in a little bit of a transition right now with my programs. I'm working on building out a new signature program that will kind of like tie all of this together. But meanwhile, I have an LLC course, I have a contracts course. I have like a course basically for everything. So you can just go check them out, get contract templates, all that good stuff on my website.
You're like, and I have a course for my course on how to use the course.
Yes. Yeah, I have like at this point, I think I have 10 different courses. I don't know if either one of you are familiar with Amy Porterfield, but I'm one of her students.
Yeah.
And
yes.
Yeah,
oh, yes.
Good. I'm an ambassador like in her Digital Course Academy program. So like I'm one of the support people in her Facebook group, which is super fun. So I'm very, very into courses.
So very pro course.
Very pro course, yes. Pro course membership.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, we'll send all of our audience there. And then we want to follow up with one final question that we like to end with our show on. Do you have any goals, personal or business, that you've been working toward in your business this year? And what are you trying to do for the rest of the year? What's your big thing you want to accomplish?
So personal goals, I'm running my next Ironman in October, so it's going to be great. Ironman triathlon. My goal is to do it under 12 hours, so very exciting.
Oh my gosh. I'm like sweaty just thinking about it.
Yeah,
amazing.
Next year, my goal is to qualify for the Boston Marathon. That's been on my list for a while, but we're working up to it. Business-wise, last year I kind of tackled like a lot of my to-do goals. So I wanted to write a book. I wrote a book, made that happen. Now I'm really just focused on revenue goals, and the year of COVID really kind of like killed my business along with everyone else's. So we're climbing our way back up from that, but I have a lot of exciting stuff planned to help really get the margins up in my own business. So people can stay tuned for those.
Yay, we are excited. I will be following along for sure. And especially to hopefully get more updates on like the Ironman thing as well, because I think that's so cool. And you said your husband also is a triathlete person?
He does marathons. So I post about my exercise stuff a little bit on my business Instagram, but not a lot, because all of my followers told me, well, none of them engage with it, first of all. So again, Kpis we should be tracking, right? And they basically all were like, Braden, we don't want to watch you running like while we're on our couch, on our laptop, like working and eating popcorn, basically. So I put all my exercise stuff like on my personal Instagram.
Oh, can you share that? Because I would love to follow you.
Well, share both. Share both Instagrams.
Yes. Well, your editor is going to have to censor me again. But actually, let me look if I even remember what it's called. I don't ever really share it. No, not very many people follow me there. It's Braden _bitch. That's my Instagram.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's Braden bitch. That's my Instagram account, my personal one. And it's a lot of just like CrossFit and triathlon business.
Okay, good. Because I'll follow you there to be inspired too.
Okay,
for
cool.
sure. Inspired tax and legally, and inspired personally and physically.
Yeah, you'll be like, it's really, really funny and interesting. This is something I've talked about on my Instagram. My business Instagram is 80% women and 20% men, because I work, in the creative industry. I'm sure your demographics are very similar. And then my personal Instagram is like 80% gay men and like 20% women.
Another KPI.
Yes. Yeah. If I ever want to become an influencer, this will be good for me to know, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. All of those things are super important to know for sure. Well, you have completely blown us away today. We knew we were in for a treat, honestly, from the moment people referred you and I started taking a look at your website, and I was like, oh, this guy is awesome. He's made it fun. He's made it different. He's doing it in a way that nobody else is currently. So thank you, Braden, for dedicating your time today to share all of your amazing knowledge with our audience. I am sure they're absolutely thrilled. So guys, don't forget to take a screenshot of this while you're listening, upload it to your Instagram stories, tag all of us, especially Braden, to let him know that you're listening and enjoying the episode. And yeah, please feel free to follow up with him, start a conversation via email or DMs if you need assistance with any of his courses or anything like that, or if you're trying to figure out which one is for you. He has a lot to choose from.
Yeah, a lot to offer. And guys, don't forget too, if you are not running an Ironman, it is your turn to leave a review this week. So that is all of us. So leave a review for the podcast, because it helps us bring on other awesome guests to teach you and helps us get found by other creatives.
All right. Thank you so much, Braden. We hope you had fun.
Thank you. I did. It was a blast.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Talk to you next time.
Bye.
Hey guys, we just wanted to hop in and talk about one of our amazing resources, the A to Z directory. All of us have thought at some point, how did she do that, or how did she make that? And maybe you don't know where to start or how the heck to produce this amazing product you've dreamt up.
Well, the A to Z directory is the missing puzzle piece in your biz, you guys. Seriously. So it's built in the form of a yearly membership, and it's your one-stop shop for finding suppliers and vendors for all the things. Literally where to print everything from custom invitations, greeting cards, mugs, koozies, acrylic printing, letterpress, custom ribbon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. and it literally goes from A to Z. From acrylic printers to zipper pouches, we have it in the A to Z directory.
We want to help all of you search less and create more with this list of 300 plus vendors and suppliers. Don't worry, they're very organized. It's not going to be overwhelming and confusing when you join. And this membership also includes access to a private Facebook community. It's incredibly active and involved. And if you need a question answered fast, that is definitely the place to go.
Yeah, our Facebook group really is the best. You guys, everyone is so helpful in there. And we're in there too, answering questions you guys might have. So it's a great way to get access to us and ask us things without sliding into our DMs. So we're more likely to answer you in the Facebook group, just saying. Anyway, also in the Facebook group, this is new for 2020 and we're really excited about it. We are hosting monthly Power Hour Q&A sessions that are live, and these are only available to our A to Z directory members. So you can hop in with us live and ask us all your burning questions in real time and just hang out with us every month. And we do these at different times so you can actually be there live, and the replays are always available in the Facebook group for members.
This resource is priced at $147 a year, which honestly is extremely affordable and is full of so many benefits, such as exclusive vendor coupons for members only. And we would love to have you guys join. Seriously, it's kind of like our family and our tribe. So visit bizbirthdaybash.com/directory to sign up today and use coupon code podcast2020 to receive $20 off your first year. That's podcast, all caps, 2020 for $20 off your first year.
We can't wait to see you in the Facebook group.